So I'm going to record my screen. Let's get my Screencastify going. Okay, so the reason why I'm going to record my screen is so that I'm going to have a recording so that you can then review this on your own, you know, and have a feeling of like, okay, I know what the questions are. The one thing that I'd like to do as a class as we are recording is I'd like to also have us talk about, let me share the other doc. So if you remember, understanding questions. So if you wouldn't mind, while we're doing the questions, all right, this is an important thing for us to start thinking about. This is basically, instead of like, you know, going crazy with you doing it on your own, I'd like to just make it like a little bit more collaborative in class. I'm going to start on lesson 1. I'm going to try to move a little faster than I did the night before. But I do want us to think about understanding the question context, the key terms, applying knowledge to the situation, and identifying a methodology or steps, and selecting the best answer. So as we move through questions, I think what you're going to recognize is that these questions all require basically elements and components of these factors. And, you know, just to kind of go a little deeper, is that the domain or category is that hardware, networking, security, troubleshooting. You know, are there key terms or components to this question? You know, basically breaking down to essential parts, you know, and understanding what those parts are. How can you relate this question to a real world scenario, which is super important because they're going to give you multiple real world scenarios. And what is the correct methodology or step-by-step? So that over time is also going to become more important because you're going to learn additional methodologies as well as the CompTIA A troubleshooting methodology. So let's do this. Let's do lesson 1 again. We're going to do those questions, but then we might even take some time to go into lesson 1 reading and just show you the resources that you're going to have. And this will be like another little pre-assessment towards our ability to review questions. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller again, but I'm going to keep it open for myself. I would definitely recommend just try to keep the understanding CompTIA A questions doc available to yourself as we kind of move through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull it out and do a different tab for myself just so I can see it and have it available to kind of ask you questions as we kind of go through. And then I also want to have you all in a tab so that I can yep. So I'm just looking at the chat. Sorry. So, okay. Everyone's found what they need. All right. So I'll kind of do a little round robin with people around which questions, but we're going to go ahead and get into lesson 1. So let me just get everyone's tab open. All right. So I'm going to go in and let's go into practice. And we're going to go into lesson 1. I'm going to reset my questions. And all right. So here we go. Let me move this over. Let's have Michael, do you want to start us off and read the question, and then we'll talk, you know, you can give us your best guess and we'll go like one by one through these questions.
I'm sorry, I was blowing my nose. What was that?
Would you mind reading the question and then give it your best guess?
Am I looking at the wrong spot? I'm sorry.
Oh, maybe I'm not showing you. Sorry, I have it open now.
Oh, that would be why.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Never mind.
Sorry, I just noticed that I wasn't sharing it, so I apologize.
Support technique. A support technician needs to install a legacy peripheral component interconnect PCI sound card. Which of the following statements about PCI is not true? I don't think I got to this part yet because I was still watching the video.
Yeah. It's okay. This is just for everybody's experience. They may or may not know the answer, but the key part of this exercise is just giving us an answer, then maybe telling us why you think what it is, or if you have a strategy, or it's just a pure guess.
PCI Express.
And then if you're not sure, we can go to someone else who was here last night who will see if they remember it, but it's either or is fine.
I'm not thinking it would be able to fit into the PCI E slot. I mean, I don't know what they look like yet, so
That's all right. So what do you think it is?
I'm probably gonna go with C for now. I mean, until I know more.
Okay, so he's going with, so he's basing, just to kind of reiterate, talking about context of questions, this one, he's looking specifically at, the components of the hardware. So in terms of solving, so C is correct. So, just to review the question, support technician needs to install a legacy peripheral component, PCI sound card. Which of the following statements about PCI is not true? So the C is the answer. It's that the PCI card can fit into the PCIe slot. So motherboards can include PCI slot ports to support legacy adapter cards, but what? It doesn't, does that mean? Okay, not true. Not true. Yeah, not true. It just gets confusing sometimes when you read it fast. PCI Express supersedes peripheral internet connect into PCI, which is a legacy bus type. And Natalie, what's legacy mean? You know now. Natalie knows. Natalie, what's legacy? She was here. Do you remember from the night before? Legacy? Michael, do you know legacy? What's legacy?
Legacy just means an older version of something.
Yep, just an older version. PCI uses parallel communications core to increase bandwidth. Most types are PCI 32-bit and work at 33. PCI is software compatible with PCIe, meaning that PCI motherboards can include PCI supports. So what do you think is essential knowledge if you were to analyze this question to get this question correct? What component? What would the domain probably be? Like the domain's hardware, but like what do you need to know? Like what's probably an important piece to understand about hardware with this question?
Well, I mean, considering if we're talking about the problem at the top where it's like a support technician needs to install a legacy thing, probably that. I mean, knowing that something can support legacy adapter cards is very important for just overall compatibility, I feel like.
Yep. So there's a little bit of the question context, which is the first component. So knowing that, what the support technician is trying to do is super important. And then the key terms is if you didn't know what that hardware was, you might have trouble, right? Or you would have to learn. So I would say, exactly the context of the question, like what's happening in the nature of upgrading something is different than buying it new. And then also there's these knowledge of the words themselves, like what is a PCI Express? What is parallel communications? I mean, how many different terms do you see in this question? One. I'm going to count on my hands. One. I see at least four.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think I saw like a few.
Yeah, so like just when you're breaking down questions, we have parallel communications, PCI Express, PCI, PCIe, And that's 4 different things that you don't necessarily might not know. So just keep that in mind. Like it's sometimes they answer the questions about the vocab. So, and this is in domain 3, exam objective 3.4. So good job. All right, next question. Let's see, who do we have? Do a little round robin. Brianna, how are you? We're gonna let Brianna get involved. How's Brianna? Is she with us? I got messages. Let me see. Okay.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah. Brianna's having issues with her mic. Okay. Brianna, do you want to put it in the chat? Which one do you think it is? So I'll read it, and if Brianna could put it in the chat for everyone to see. A computer is processing software instructions on the central processing unit, CPU. How does all computer software appear to a CPU? Let's see. Brianna, you want to give it a shot, a guess in the chat? Okay, she's just thinking for a minute. So one thing I did here was I said CPU after it said central processing unit. But if you had no idea about computers, you might not know that. I mean, it might be obvious, but you never know. CPU.
Oh, the way I like to think of the CPU, at least in my eyes, is I kind of think of it as just like the processing station of the computer. So whenever I think of like, oh, my brain is not processing these words that people are saying to me, it's a processing issue. So it's kind of like the CPU in my brain isn't working.
It's a good analogy.
I don't know if that helps anyone, but that's kind of what I think of a little bit.
Yeah, people call it the brain of the computer. A lot of times they'll say it's the brain. You know, they'll say it's the brain. So a computer is processing software on the CPU. How does all computer software appear to a CPU? Is it a bus, binary, RAM, or system clock? So does anyone have, let's help Brianna out. What's one thing we don't think it is? Let's reduce one without giving, does anyone?
It's definitely not D.
Right. Definitely not
That's
D.
just a random function. Well, actually, no, I'm trying to remember what that function was. I remember there was like...
I think that system clock is just like the internal timing of the BIOS.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know there's a system for that, and I don't remember what it was.
And you set it, you kind of set it, I think, upon install or whatever, and then, it, you know, they're usually pretty accurate.
I also think there's like the settings where you can change like the time zone. So I'm not sure if there's a thing there. I'm pretty sure there is.
So we're recommending, Brianna, that it's not system clock.
Definitely not.
And there's one that I probably would have said here too that I know it's not, that I think.
Yes. Yeah. I kind of do know the answer, but I'm not going to give it away.
All right, Brianna. I'll give you a guess. RAM, random. It says
random access memory.
Random access memory is what RAM stands for. And binary is a series of code that appears as zeros and ones. That's another tip. And a bus is I don't even want to, it's basically a piece of hardware.
Yeah, that's the only one I'm not very familiar with.
Okay, so she's going with B. Let's see what we get. Yay, it is B. So good job, Brianna. We reduced it. Yep. So how does all computer software works by running instructions in the CPU, and computers process all the software and data as the ones and zeros of binary code. Bus interfaces on the motherboard transmit instructions and data between computer components using electrical signals. So that's the bus interface. So just notice, like, even though we got the question right, it's telling us what the other items here mean. Okay, so you know, when you have this setting on this practice question, it really helps you understand things almost faster than the reading, to be honest with you. Motherboard transmit instructions. Many types of bus interfaces can supply power to connected components. RAM, random access memory storage technology, is non-persistent. Does anyone want to tell me what non-persistent means?
It doesn't store. It only stores so much, and then it kind of resets what it doesn't need.
Yep. Yep. So like if you buy a computer and it says it has 16 gigs of RAM, but then it has 120 gigs of local storage, you know, like the local storage is the persistent memory. The 16 gigs of RAM is non-persistent. So the RAM helps.
For example, yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say. For example, like if you have to delete stuff off your photos from your phone, that's the persistent memory. RAM is more just like a constant thing. For example, like I think a good way to think of RAM is a lot like, I mean, Minecraft is a good example of a game that uses a lot of RAM. Because
any gaming machine really, like, so a gaming machine
I know,
needs
but like especially like an infinite generation system.
yeah, and it also CPU, you know, the CPU, like RAM is basically RAM. The way to think of RAM is it's kind of like the engine of the computer. It has to like run processes, it runs software, it, you know, it's running everything in the front so that the back can do what it needs to do. So, but it's a good vocab word. Motherboard system clock synchronizes the operation of all parts of the PC and provides basic timing signal for the CPU. PCs measure clock speeds in megahertz or gigahertz. So this one question, even though it just deals with the CPU, and so this deals with a couple things. The CPU, and CPU is hardware, right? And then RAM is also hardware, but we're also talking about processing of the computer and how a computer processes information. So you're learning the parts of the computer, and which will then help you, you know, think about how the components come together. And what else? System clock is going to be information around how the original BIOS memory gets set up. So just note with every question, there's multiple layers. So if you don't feel like you know the answer, it might just be because, you know, there's like another area that we're working on learning, and don't let it get you down too much. All right, next question. All right, I know Christopher, you available?
Yes.
Would you mind doing this one? The installing the support technician installing a new SATA.
A support technician is installing a new SATA hard drive on a new computer. What is the best type of cable connector for technician connector the technician will plug in to supply power to the drive? I want to say it's not a USB connector.
I would agree there.
So the support technician is installing a new SATA hard drive on a new computer. What is the best type of cable connector?
And then the word "the best" might mean that there's like an option. I mean,
and because you know, I don't know a lot about like
this one's okay to it's okay to guess.
So my question to you, what is like SATA?
SATA is just a connection type. Like when you, like if you ever pulled out like a hard drive on a computer, it's like a multi-wired connection.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay to guess because your guess will basically like show it. We're gonna see the different results anyways. So like, it's whatever you feel.
Go with A.
All right. And you did a good job because you reduced. Oh, wait, is it all? All right. All right. So it was A. You got it right. Look at that. We're on a roll tonight for guesses. So it is a 15-pin SATA power connector to connect the hard drive to the PC's power supply. So just to address the, you know, what you said and the hardware piece here, you know, 15-pin is, you know, it's kind of like We actually saw a picture of it when we were scrolling through the lessons. We'll take a look at it in the chapter. It's basically like it has 15 pins on it. It's like a rectangle, usually black, and it has a cable, and it basically connects the power to the SATA port of the hard drive. So it powers the hard drive. What else should we? So it's a new SATA hard drive on a new computer. Yep. So that was good that you reviewed that. Serial Advanced Technology, that's attachment. That's what SATA stands for, is the standard means of connecting internal storage. So you'll see it on the inside of a computer, connecting like the hard drive to like the power. And you'll also see SATA with a couple other applications. The 7-pin connector is for data and does not supply power. So that's the big difference here in the question. That would reduce, 2 of the answers, right? So 7-pin is for data, 15-pin is for internal storage drives. Oh wait, so 7-pin connector is for data and does not supply power. The 15 is power to the drive. So just think power with the 15, which kind of is a good way to, maybe a memory device there, like, you need more for power. Then they have legacy storage devices. So this will come up in the chapter 2, this Molex type connector. A Molex is an older type connector. You probably have never seen one unless you've been building computers for a little while. It's usually white or clear plastic and has 4 pins. Actually, no, you'll see it with some smaller drives. Power supply unit. And then USB connector predominantly connects external, right? So we probably all have seen like an external USB or a mini USB connector for an external SATA peripheral drives to an eSATA P port, which is a non-standard powered port. So that's kind of the newer way. People like now, if you want to have additional space on your computer, you can actually, like what they say, map a drive. That's like an external drive to your computer to have, extra space. But the speeds are generally a little slower because they have to go over that cord. But it's another way of adding space without, doing an internal extra drive. So good job. This is one that the reading, just re-reviewing is going to help people. But I would say the big takeaway here is definitely the difference between the 15-pin and the 7-pin. And then also understanding that, like, if you're doing an external SATA, it's going to be a USB. The Molex is also a vocab word that you're going to want to know. So,
Okay.
Yep. So there's like something a little bit with each one, and that's what you'll find with each question is the context here is a new computer with a new SATA. So inside. So what's the best type of cable? All right. We'll go to the next. Let's see. Who do we have here? What else do we have in our call here? Siho, would you mind doing this one?
Yeah, sure. I believe we had this question yesterday, but sure, I'll go over it again.
Yeah. So we'll find. Did you have the same one? Yeah. So you'll find this lesson 1 is only about 15 questions. So they'll mix up. So, but we'll get to the end of lesson 1 today. We didn't get to the end yesterday.
Okay. All right. A manager directs a support technician to plug a device into the communications COM port. What port is the manager referring to?
Do you remember?
I think so. I'm not even sure. I think it's B.
Why? I'm just gonna tease you and ask you why. So a communications port.
It's funny because I remember I looked at the question earlier today and I can't even remember it at the moment.
I'll go with B. Let's take a look at it. So it was serial.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And that's okay. I mean, that's why we do it, like we go back over it because one here, if we were going to use just to practice some process of elimination, IDE is definitely like not a port. It's what's called an integrated development environment. And that's like a place where you do programming. So it's like often with some of these questions, you'll have one word that means nothing to do with the answers. So just keep that in mind. So let me just make sure. I think they want to like make me stop my recording and I might have to start it again. I'm going to end the recording and start it over again on this question. So let me just do that real quick. So let me start another recording. I have so IDE is an integrated development environment. USB is type of port and serial is type of port. So in Windows, the serial port or recommended standard number 232 port is also known as the COM port. The integrated IDE interface. So that's a different type of IDE. Sorry. Integrated drive electronics. I thought they were trying to really throw us. Principal mass storage device interface for PCs for many years. So that's the parallel advanced. So what parallel port? Does anyone remember a parallel port? Ever heard of that type of port before? Anyone ever heard of the parallel? It's kind of old. A small computer system interface is one example of a legacy parallel port, but one where the SCSI host bus adapter can control multiple devices by internal ribbon cables or external SCSI cables. While modern interfaces like the universal serial port or USB or serial and RS-232 interface, which is known as a COM port on Windows, uses much less sophisticated signaling. So modern interfaces, I think that's an important point. Modern computers do accept USB as serial, but this particular COM port uses less sophisticated like signaling. So just realize it's kind of getting near that kind of legacy idea. So that might be something to help you in the future. It's just to remember that RS, this alone would help me remember, I think, the recommended standard serial port. So serial goes with COM, if that helps. Other thoughts about this question before we move on? I know we did it yesterday, but it seemed a lot less complicated yesterday for some reason. I feel like we blew through that one yesterday. Okay. So, all right. Next question. All right. Who do we have? Rosie, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Would you mind reading this question for us?
Support technician is installing a PC IE card that will use a combination of system memory and 8 GB of dedicated memory. What type of card is the tech installing? Hold on. Graphics?
All right. Let's see how we do.
I don't know, sorry.
That's okay. You are correct. We're doing good. You guys are very in tune with if you are guessing, you're very in tune tonight. We're doing pretty good. So a support, basically when anyone we had our little gaming conversation. Michael, do you want to tell us what a graphics card does?
How do I put this into a coherent way? I know what it does. I just don't know how to put it into a good sentence.
Well, the question itself gives you a little hint of like how it works.
Well, the graphics card generally powers a lot of the components. How do I put this into words? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on how to.
It's like, I would say the graphics card enables the computer to output higher end graphics that require like memory of different types. So, you know,
That's kind of what I was trying to get at. I just didn't know how to put it into words.
So you see someone who has a gaming computer versus someone who just has like a regular desktop. Well, the factors of what makes the game look good on the gaming computer versus look a certain way on a desktop is on the gaming computer, the graphics card is often like one of the more expensive things when they build a gaming computer because it's a much more powerful graphics card than on like a regular desktop. Like your graphics card could be like $2,000 on a really high end gaming computer, but like can literally be like $100 on a regular desktop. So,
and that's also why there's like a lot of games that you can find that will have like system requirements, and like you'll have to have a graphics card of this ability in order to actually play the game.
And what they're telling us in this question is that the graphics card is using a combination of system memory and dedicated memory. So it's requiring a lot of resources. So, you know, that card is helping this computer have access to more resources to run more advanced graphics. And nowadays, like that's really essential. Like a lot of software, you know, some requires more advanced graphics. And so he's basically updating this computer. So it, you know, sound cards provide audio playback through speakers, and they can go in through an audio jack or sound cards. Sound cards could also used to just be slid into a computer and connected to the motherboard too. That was like the old school way of doing it. Network interface cards, NICs, usually come already installed as part of the motherboard, but a technician may need to upgrade it to use a different type of network or cabling. Yes. So you might have, so for the NICs, an example of that is you might have an old, so for example, I'm using a Mac computer right now. It's a newer Mac, and the wireless card is inside of it. I can plug this computer in anywhere, and if it has wireless, I can connect to it. On a older PC, it might not even have a wireless card. I might have to add on like an adapter or something to be able to provide wireless to that computer. So a network interface card is something that allows the device to connect to a network. And it could be wireless, or it could be like an Ethernet port. So like on this Mac I'm using, it has an Ethernet connection. So that's built into the computer itself. Now, you can also do wireless that way. Now, they also say a Wi-Fi adapter to connect to a wireless network. So the adapters need to be at a certain standard. So a network interface is basically it's a card that allows it to interface with the network. So I would say from this question, Rosie, the things to take away is that a graphics card is usually something that requires, you know, memory and an intense amount of memory to run things. Usually that's how people speak about it. So like if you see a question related to like memory and what the graphics card needs, like that's probably an indicator they're asking about that. And then sound cards, you're probably not going to get a lot of questions about sound cards because they're not a very complicated type of, you know, piece of the computer, but it does function in some of the same ways. And then it connects to the motherboard and provides output for sound. And then NICs come as part of the motherboard chipset. So like when you see NIC, you just want to remember network interface card. So basically it's part of the computer that allows it to connect to the network. And then there's a Wi-Fi adapter is also kind of similar to an NIC, except it's usually just plugged in like a USB or you can slide it in as a card. a Wi-Fi card, but nowadays it's just easier to, it looks like a USB drive, but it's actually your wireless if the computer doesn't have it internally. So hopefully that helps. I know that's like a lot of information in that question, but so Rosie, let me ask you one more question here. With this question, what type of information about a graphics card in this question is essential to kind of understand the question? Like, say you read about graphics cards, what do you think you need to know about them to do well on this question?
I think it's because of the memory and
You're right. Yep.
I think it's
The memory, basically the hardware component, right? And also they're kind of giving it a little bit of a context that a support technician's doing it. So maybe you would also need to know about the PCIe card. But that PCIe card information is a little, even though it's included in what they're talking about, it's not essential. So like, exactly, yep. But that's a little way that they try to confuse you, because say you weren't sure or got confused by, oh, a PCIe card. Oh my goodness, what's that about? Well, you don't really, it's not like essential to necessarily understand like the more important part of the question. So very good. All right, we'll move to the next question. Let's see how we're doing. We're going to keep cooking. So a support technician, okay, I'll read this one and then I'll ask everyone who's listening to give me, let's see, their best. They can say A, B, C, or D. A support technician opened the case to a PC and saw a square socket component. What component has the support tech located? RAM, adapter, CPU, drive. So square socket component, which is like a very broad. So a socket is something something's put into, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a square one, we have, Natalie says D. Any other guesses? Michael says, I think C. All right. Oh, getting the votes for C. So let's see. Majority of votes went C. It is C. So let's go over why. So the support technician is removing the central processing unit, the CPU. So it's the CPU, sorry, I should have said that. The support technician is removing the central processing unit. Unlike any other connectors, the CPU socket is square and the heat sink and fan are on top of it. All right, so this is kind of an important part of computer parts. Like, I know you guys haven't looked at the lesson reading or those parts, you know, but I'm gonna give you a quick description here for those who aren't like super new to computer parts. So the reason why they said socket is because on a lot of computers, sometimes you buy it right now. If you went to like Best Buy to buy a computer, 90% of the computers inside of Best Buy have their CPU is like soldered onto the motherboard. Like it comes as part of the computer's brain. Okay. Then there are more advanced computers where like you build them yourself or like you make them upgradable, and sometimes they'll be where you can remove, you know, the CPU and actually upgrade the central processing unit. And the shape is square, so it kind of like can flip in and out. There's like a little lever, and so you can buy it separate and kind of pop it in. Then they say heat sink and fan. So does anyone want to tell me what they think the heat sink does in a computer?
If I remember correctly, it's just essentially what if I remember correctly.
What's it look like? It has a unique look. What's it look like?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I know the fan and all that stuff is CPUs that gets really hot on the computer.
Yep. So what's the heat sink do?
Keeps it cool.
It keeps it cool. So the heat sink keeps it cool, and the heat sink is like a series of like walls right next to each other, like out of aluminum. And when we look at the reading, you'll see a picture of it. But what it does is it takes the heat off of the CPU and helps keep the computer. And then the fan kind of takes any other additional heat and kind of pushes it out. So it's all about kind of keeping the temperature of that computer down so that it can function properly. So just that's like a little inside of what a computer is. You know, there's a central processor unit that's, you know, square, where it has a square, you know, basically brain of the computer. And then there's a heat sink, which is basically aluminum that is like these little tiny walls, and that keeps it, you know, disperses the heat through the aluminum. And then there's a fan kind of blows it out. So I just want to like start to paint that picture of like that functioning part of the computer. System RAM is normally dual inline memory modules fitted to motherboard slots. DIMM slots have catches at either end and are located close to the CPU socket. So this is a lot of information all at once, but it would also be in your reading. So I actually feel like it's easier to process this way a little bit. So system RAM, which we talked about, RAM is random access memory. And remember, that's that non-persistent memory. That's that memory that comes and runs everything in the front of the computer, and it's kind of like the engine. Dual inline memory modules. So basically in the computer, there's these slots that are long and you fit RAM into them. All right. And they kind of slide in and they click, because you might have a computer that when you bought it, it came with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but say a lot of computers are upgradable. So one thing when you buy a computer that you want to ask, like, what can I, or usually they don't tell you like at the store, but you want to make sure, like say you're on Amazon buying a computer, you want to be like, well, what can I upgrade my RAM to? Because you might buy a computer that has 8 gigs of RAM, and within a couple of years, you might want to upgrade it to 16 or even more. But it's only going to be able, the motherboard can probably only handle a certain amount. So you can actually make your computer run faster if it supports it. So they have this thing called DIMM slots. And that's that dual inline memory module. So they're like these two slots that you can add RAM to. So you might have 2 4 gig slots that equals 8. And then you could buy 2 8 gig slot. You could put 2 8s in and make it 16. Or you could buy 2, you know, even more and just keep going up. But your computer most computers are only upgradable to like 16 or 32 tops right now. Like when you go up.
There's only like I've seen those ports, and there's usually like 4 of them. Like
yeah, and it depends on the RAM. Like you can buy if you buy a computer that's only like anywhere between like $600 and $1,000, it probably only upgrades to like 16 to 32. And then the thing is that at 32, like it's probably not going to function as well as it could, just because it's like putting like a Porsche engine into like a Toyota. It's like, it's like going to be too much, and it's not going to function really well, but it comes in incredibly handy if say you bought like an HP computer 2 years ago that was 8 gigs of RAM and it really worked well for you. And then you're like, boy, my computer's running kind of slow, and you upgrade it and add it to 16, you'll notice a difference. Like it will run a lot better. But they do the motherboard, well, the processors matter, you know, whether or not it will allow it. So just keep in mind, like just when you buy a computer, just always kind of research like, well, what can I upgrade the RAM to if I want to? And it's like a little bonus, because RAM is actually pretty cheap too. It usually comes like for $50, you can do like, you know, for $30, you can do like 8 to 16 gigs of RAM, depending on where you buy it. Support technicians. So what this talks about though is these slots. The DIL line DIMMs is where you put the RAM. Okay. And they have these little hooks on the ends that kind of click it in. Support technicians can insert adapter cards into slots on the motherboard to install or upgrade interfaces that the motherboard's chipset does not. So you can add an adapter, basically onto a motherboard to support some things. So that's where they're talking about different types of sockets. Drives fit into a drive bay in the chassis. So the chassis is kind of like the main part of the computer, like the body of the computer, the case, and then connect to a serial advanced technology attachment, SATA, which we learned a little bit about, via a cable into the power supply via a SATA power or Molex connector. So that last part just kind of refers back to that other question, like what we learned there, talking about drives being connected to, to the power, right? We learned anything from that first question, that is needed again here. And then they talk about power connector. So, all right. That's a good question. That, even though it doesn't give you a lot of descriptions, it tells you a lot about the parts of the computer. So
It's kind of funny because nowadays it's starting to be, the CPUs are starting to become rectangles, like the Threadrippers.
well, that's why what's his name? What's that company? It's making so much money.
NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're building machines that no one else can build, like they're building machines that have to process computing powers at powers that have never been built before, and don't know how strong they need to be in some cases because the technology is changing so fast. So for those who don't know, NVIDIA is a card company. What's the best way to describe them? NVIDIA graphics cards company originally, right? And now they're basically all types of systems. Let me give you a great description of NVIDIA. My buddy, I wonder if he sold it or kept it, had NVIDIA stock back in the early 2000s. So yeah, we can talk a little bit more about NVIDIA, but NVIDIA is on basically the cutting edge of developing hardware solutions for AI. So it's heavy duty stuff, because think about what AI does. AI is more than playing a video game. It's more than playing, just like a static internet. It's basically taking ideas that people are putting into it and generating new ideas out of it, which requires a lot of processing power. And there's also different types of AI. There's, machine learning. So there's programming that needs to run on computers that have tremendous processing power. And it's not necessarily that everybody needs that processing power in their homes. Someday they will, but we'll all have AI powered homes. But there are companies that need that type of processing power on the back end of their businesses to run the systems that are being designed by the software, because it's powerful. Does that make sense? Basically, computers need to be like supercomputers, faster, to kind of catch up with technology. It's an exciting time. It's like we're at the very beginning of a big shift, bigger than probably what the internet was, which is kind of crazy.
Yep, a lot of laws and regulations going to be put into it.
Yeah, I don't think much is going to slow it down though, because it's the crazy part. No one seems to be slowing it down too much. So, Katya, how are you? Is Katya with us?
I'm fine, teacher.
Hi. Would you mind reading our next question?
Okay. A video production company, no video, media, the desktop multimedia, files to partner and customer sites. Often, the media has to be prepared with only very short notice. In the past, the time taken to transfer a file from the development workstation has resulted in delay and missed appointments. To mitigate
Yep.
this issue, the company has procured USB 3.2 Gen 2 plus 2 storage device and Windows PC workstation expansion cards. The device and the expansion cards support more USB hardware port types. Which of the following adapter cables will enable the device to take full advantage of the high transfer rate?
Do you remember this one?
No.
All right. Is it type C to type C, which is like really faster, lightning to type A, or is it the micro to type A? I think
Maybe C.
Oh, I'll give you C. Let's see. Nope, it is the type C to type C. So with this question, whenever you come across this question, you want to remember that the type C is kind of the quickest one listed here, because even though the lightning to type A is USB 3, USB 3 is not as fast as C. So type C connectors and ports support data transfers up to 3.2 and Gen 2.2 20 Gbps rate. The connector is also much smaller than the type A and is reversible. These improvements mean that other USB connector form factors are being phased out. So that basically tells you, like, we're moving the fastest with the type C. But it's important to know type A and the USB 3 with the blue. So also all recognize, I mentioned this last night, that USB 3 has the blue inside the USB port. So if you need a port that has more power, it's the blue one. But this physical interface only supports speeds up to 10 gigabytes per second. And the micro USB only supports the 10 gigabytes per second. So basically the same. And then lightning connector and port is mostly used by Apple, iPhone, and iPad mobile devices. Though it is present on some storage devices, a type A to lightning cable would not support the transfer rate. So just remember, this type C is kind of changing the game in terms of data connection and speed. So this is the context, is definitely with the video production company and understanding that they need high transfer rates because they're moving files. So they're looking to kind of move things from one to another. So like, for example, if you're at your desk and you're working with video, being able to use a USB, like a type C connector, is going to be, say you want to move your video files from like your Android phone to your computer to edit them. Like, you definitely want to use the USB-C connector, and you'd want to use it straight into the computer, not put it through the USB port. So if you can always get an adapter, it's helpful. It's faster than if you take like the memory card and then put it into a USB powered card reader, for example. Just to start thinking about the speed of different things. So good job though. We did that one last night too. So just remember the type C, and that's about basic cable types, connectors, features, and purposes is all in lesson 1. So let's keep moving along. Now, just a quick question for people on the call. Like, I'm sure you can all see my screen full screen, right? Like
Yep.
the question. Okay. So what I will is I won't worry about my recording. I'll just cut the recording out of the video of the class because I'm also recording the class. So I won't worry so much about it as long as I've got it showing. All right. So let's go back around. Michael, you want to start us over again? We'll go around in a circle again.
Sure. Which of the following statements regarding modern connectors and ports is untrue? Why do I get one of the untrue questions again?
I hate the untrue ones.
Yeah, I know, because they're trick questions. A lot of these, I don't know what the words mean. I mean, they use edge contacts. What is that?
Mm-hmm. The point of the contacts on the edge of the connectors is how it needs to connect to get the touch to work.
Oh, you mean like the
actual physical contact points.
Okay.
Modern connectors and ports.
Well, then that's just it can't be A then. That's just
so what about some are reversible? Is that true?
Reversible. In what way do you mean reversible? Because
that's a good question. I mean, they sometimes use keying. Oh, do you see? Did you lose my screen?
A little bit.
All right, let me find. Let me
30-minute recording limit.
I know. Let me stop sharing that and share my CompTIA A practice. Here we go. We'll be back in the game. Here we go.
Do you not just use OBS to record the stuff?
The problem with OBS is it's like I have a Screencastify Pro account, but it's on an extension that's not on this browser. So if I do it, it'll be annoying. And then with OBS, I have to store it somewhere, and then it's going to be like a 5 gig file I have to keep somewhere until I upload it somewhere else. So what I'll do is I'll just use the WebEx recording, which stores it on the WebEx end.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I'm sick of big files.
I don't blame you. I had to deal with that for a while.
The video of our last class was literally 6 gigabytes, 6 to 8 gigs.
Didn't even have audio to it, by the way.
Oh, the one I did or the one from WebEx?
The one that you uploaded yesterday, the questions.
I'll fix that then. I'll just do it from the WebEx. I actually already cut it, so I'll be sure to share that.
Reversible. I'm still trying to. I know it can't be A. I think B is also true, so not that. I'm kind of down to the last two. I don't think it's D. I think D is the answer because I don't think it's true.
Okay, so we'll go with
I'm gonna go with that because I'm not 100%.
Good process. It's B. So they use internal connection points, and it's okay not to know. It's not like you studied for this, so it's okay not to know. So all right. So what we're learning here is about input and output port. So I talked about this a little bit last night. The I/O
reversible in like that way. Never mind. That makes more sense.
And it's and that's the third thing, vocab. So why I like going over the questions so much is that there's the vocab and then there's understanding what it means, and then it's also your experience with the questions. So the next time you run into this question, it'll be a better friend to you.
I was gonna say if instead of it saying reversible, if it said backwards compatibility, I probably would.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Yeah, that's kind of a trick one, but they're trying to be tricky. So, so an input an IO port is the external connection point for a particular type of bus interface. So remember, when you ever see bus, that's a port interface. Okay, something that can be plugged into. And the connector is part of the peripheral cable that inserts into a port with the same shape. Most connectors and input-output ports now use edge contacts that connect the cable wires to the circuit boards. So basically, that's how they connect. The term edge contacts. A lot of available connectors and ports have an asymmetric design called keying to prevent users from inserting them the wrong way around. That's a good learning point. Like if you see this asymmetric design, what do they mean by that in terms of like you not being able to plug it in? What's a cord that
Well, they mean keying as in like it only fits in a certain way. So
Right.
that way, okay, that makes more sense.
So yeah, I know what you were thinking too, like keying, like you had to like write a code to like have it work.
Which I was like, I don't know what that. I feel like that's not related to a port. But if they mean keying as in a literal key, as in like insert.
So what is a
key?
what is a port that has an asymmetric design so you don't do it wrong?
I don't remember. I know that there's a lot of ports that will plug into like those like chargers, like the portable chargers.
HDMI you can't put in the wrong way.
USB A you can't put in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
If you were talking like that, yeah.
Then what's another one? DVI is
DVI the one I was thinking of? Because
it has just like the angle cut.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking of. Yeah,
and then USB and even USB, the original one's probably the one that's the most annoying because you do have to flip it to put it the right way in.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you'll always be in the dark trying to plug it in somewhere and having it go terribly.
Or you just start jamming it thinking it's the right way because you want to.
Yeah.
All right. Christopher, you mind taking our next one?
Okay.
And then what I'll do is after this one is I'll read them just to get through lesson 1, and then we'll get into lesson 2. So we'll get some more done.
Okay. A support technician needs to install an optical disk drive in a new tower. Which panel should be removed so that the technician can gain access to the optical drive and connect the cables? So the support technician is install an optical disk drive in a new tower.
So you got to remember where the optical disk drive is located, usually on the top, and then you need to connect the cables to the power.
Okay.
And to the motherboard.
So it would not be D then to the bottom or the rear.
Nope.
So we can also take out C then.
Right. Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna say B through the side of the panel.
Yes. So the side panel is like, you'll find a majority of stuff will be through the side panel. The only thing that will be through the front panel is if something's like the optical disk drive will be installed through the front, but then be screwed in. And then you'll need to go in the side to kind of connect it to the motherboard. Usually the motherboard's up against the side of the case. And then the back of the computer is where you're going to have like the ports are going to connect in. And then also, power is going to have to run from there. So, the side panel is going to be generally the panel you're going to pull off. That's kind of the one that like people pull off and they kind of like blow the dust out, when they're cleaning a computer. And it's usually the only one that comes off without taking screws off. Like there usually be like a handle because you need to do it often. So if you've ever taken like the side panel off, you know what I mean. But, you don't have to unscrew anything usually. So the technician will hook up optical media drive to the side panel. The tower case has a side cover. Some towers do have top panels, but it's not as common. There are a wide variety of computer cases. It's not like standard. Like if you look at websites, you'll see there's a lot of different types of cases, but for the most part, the side panel is the one. A majority of like routine maintenance and stuff will be done through.
So like the side panel is the one that is most common?
Yep.
Okay.
Because they'll have like a little handle that'll click and pull it open. Like I could go into the lab at Bunker Hill right now and without any tools, open up the side panel and pull wires out, because sometimes they'll lock them up. They'll have like a little locker, but usually no. And it's usually just, it's easier to clean them if they want to do that. It's just like a maintenance thing. You know, the rear panel is the power. The PSU has integrated fan. Bottom panel, there are cutout slots aligned with the position of the adapter card to allow cables to connect to any ports in the cards. So that's good. You remembered from last night. Very good. All right, let's do group guessing to get through here. So we get halfway through, we're going to bust out questions and get through lesson 1. All right, so we're doing good. We're moving along. So a support technician is connecting a current extended integrated drive electronics cable, EIDE, to a PC's motherboard and knows that pin 1 on the cable must match up with pin 1 on the port. How can the tech know where pin 1 is on the cable? We talked about this one last night. Does anyone remember?
Yeah.
So put your answer in the chat. What do we got? Is this all the new ones? 1944. Okay, so we got a lot of people saying C. What else do we got? C.
Genuinely just cannot remember this one.
So the answer is C. So this is one of those ones that comes from the reading. Now look at that. You did one question last night on something that you knew probably nothing about, right? And you already remembered. So that's a victory. So think about it that way. Like instead of reading the entire chapter and then waiting for this one area of the chapter where you were going to know this one piece of information, you now know it by answering the question twice. So that's why I like to start with the assessments, because you end up kind of grabbing on and it's good to see that people are remembering stuff. Now, when you go back and you look at the reading, you're going to be like, oh, I kind of understand this a little bit. At least I've answered a question to understand it a little bit better. So very good job. So just to review, on cable 1, pin 1 has a red stripe. Manufacturers also key the connectors to prevent technicians from inserting them the wrong way around. An EIDE cable typically has 3 color-coded connectors. The blue is for the motherboard, and pin white on the cable will have a red stripe. An EIDE cable typically has 3 color-coded connectors. Black or N connector attaches to device 0, and pin 1 on the cable will have a red stripe. The EIDE cable typically has 3 color-coded connectors. The gray or middle connector attaches to device 1, and pin 1 on the cable will have a red stripe. So in this case, the support technician is connecting that EIDE cable to a PC's motherboard and knows that pin 1 must match up with pin 1 on the port. So how can the tech know where pin 1 is on the cable? So that is what we're learning. All right, good job. A support, and you're going to understand that question even more when you do the reading and you learn about the other chords a little bit more too. So a support technician manages digital displays, but has some, we should remember this one too, has some older computers with video cards that can support both analog and digital monitors. What type of video interface do these older computers have? HDMI, DVI, VGA, DisplayPort. Do we remember from last night? Lots of guesses for B. Yeah, we remember. Good job. So what we're remembering from last night is that older computers have a DVI that supports both analog and digital outputs, just like I was comparing them to the HDMI. DVI is no longer an active deployment. That's not true. I've bought lots of DVIs in the last year or two. Older display devices and video cards. That HD high definition multimedia interface video interfaces only support digital displays. Older video interfaces such as VGA supported computer monitors driven by an old analog signal. The 15-pin video graphics array, VGA, port was the standard analog around for years, needed it for your monitor interface for PCs for a very long time, though it started to be phased out completely now. I would say yes, that one's pretty much gone. DisplayPort video interfaces only support digital displays. older video interfaces like DVI supported computer monitors and projectors that were predominantly like CRT types, so like a TV, an old school TV. So older computers have a DVI that supports both. Basically, in order to get the benefits of HDMI, you need a DVI. So good memory from last night. All right, we're chugging along. A support technician is working on a motherboard that is 12 by 9.6 inches and has 7 expansion slots. Which form factor is the technician working with? ATX, MATX, FFF, Mini ITX. Do we remember this one? Natalie's chiming in. We're going to go with ATX. Yes. So Advanced Technology Extended ATX specification is the standard form factor for most desktop PC motherboards and is 12 inches wide by 9.6 inches deep and can contain up to 7 expansion slots. The micro standard is just like a step down. The 9.6, it's a square, 244 by 244 square board. Micro boards having a maximum of 4 expansion slots. So then there's a small form factor. PCs are popular as home machines and for use as mini servers. They use the Mini ITX. Mini ITX is 170 by 170 board with 1 expansion slots. These are designed for small cases, but do note that most Mini ITX boards can be mounted in ATX cases. What is the benefit of what's the major benefit of a small form factor? This is just, I'm teasing you guys with a tech question.
Portability.
Like, because I'm pricing them out right now at my job, like, and they're cheaper sometimes or more expensive depending on how much RAM and storage they have. So like the ones that we're looking at buying, like we have some, but we're putting them on the back of the monitor as opposed to being like on the floor or having to take up a whole space. So they're like a smaller form factor. The price is coming down because the RAM price is coming down and the storage price is coming down. So like the overall amount of material that they take up is less, uses less. And I mean, we were pricing out one with like 16 gigs of RAM, an i5, a decent i5 processor, and they're just under $700. So like they used to be like more expensive to kind of cram a lot of tech into a small thing, and now it's kind of going the other way around. So this is just like the value of some of these questions is also like in your job and career that you're going to run into different form factors for desktops. And so if you ever have to take one apart, these are the sizes of the motherboards, all right? Of the, not the motherboards, but the motherboards, but basically the size of the board that's going to be on the inside of the case. So that's the form factor, all right? So form factor is basically the design of the computer shape and size. All right, a support technician needs to connect the USB port on a portable monitor, okay? Portable monitor. To an HDMI port on a laptop to extend the laptop's display. What kind of cable will the technician use to accomplish this? A SCSI, B, adapter, C, EIDE, D, DVI. What do we got for guesses? I see some B's rolling in. So an adapter. People are guessing adapter. You got it right. So how will we use the adapter? So what I want you to notice here with this question is I think a lot of people might have gotten this question right because of some of the knowledge they learned in other questions. Would you say a lot of your understanding of this question came from things you learned in other questions? Just type a yes in the chat if you would agree with that, because I think there's some other questions that kind of pushed us to know and be able to describe. But because we talked about SCSI, we talked about EIDE, and we talked about DVI, but none of those topics kind of connect really well with what the scenario was saying, if you notice that. So just keep that in mind if you're doing some questions, that understanding other questions will help you with another question. All right.
I was going to say a lot of my knowledge so far has come from a different IT course I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking like a bunch of them, basically. Well, not a bunch of them, but like I've taken like a fair amount of IT so far, and a lot of my knowledge is coming from that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good. It's either hands-on experience, or you've taken other courses, or, you know, like the questions here, though, like these are very specific. These other answers have come up in questions that we've addressed just tonight. So, so the answer with this one's an adapter. Two different types of cables at each end. So you need an adapter to connect the HDMI port on the laptop to a USB port on the monitor. So a small computer system interface can connect both internal devices and externals, such as scanners and printers, but must enable termination on the first and last chain devices in the chain. An extended integrated drive electronics, the EIDE cable, typically has 3 color-coded connectors and was the principal mass storage interface for desktop PCs for many years. And then we just started talking about the DVI, does both analog and digital outputs. It's unlikely to be encountered to over display devices and video cards. So that was why it was used for the older laptop on the screen when we wanted to push the image out. Here we go. So just a couple more on this one. So a support technician plugged a monitor with a USB-C cable connector into a USB-C port on the computer, but the monitor would not function. Why would the monitor not work? Give me an answer for this one. A support technician plugged a monitor with a USB-C cable connector into a USB-C port on the computer. But oh, you got to throw it in the chat. Let's see what people say. I just want to see if people say the same thing. So are people sending chats in? I see things from 1952. So why would the monitor not work? Put your best guesses in the chat. A, it was not an HDMI cable. B, it was not a DisplayPort cable. It was not a lightning cable. It was not a cable with DP alt mode or Thunderbolt. People's guesses, D. That is correct. D is the correct answer. USB-C can work for display purposes if the cable and port support DisplayPort alternate mode. If the cable and port support DisplayPort alternate mode. Thunderbolt version 3 also uses the same connectors as a USB-C cable, offering additional capabilities. Of course, HDMI is widely used, but it has a beveled connector, which they didn't use in the USB-C. And the same with DisplayPort with HDMI. It's a different size. Lightning port and connector cables are proprietary to Apple and only are used on Apple. So good job, people. Very good. I think it was second to last question here. A support technician opened a PC case and observed a small computer system SCSI connector plugged into the motherboard. What can the technician know to be true about the connector? It's likely connected to the hard disk. So the key here is open a PC case and observed a small computer system interface connector plugged into the motherboard. What can the technician know to be true about the connector? What are people saying? I think Siho's right. Yes. So when you see things connected to the motherboard, generally hard disk, right? Because that's where the brain of the computer is and things are all kind of centrally connected. So SCSI connectors are commonly used to connect hard disk as well as other storage devices like tape drives, CD, DVD drives, and external storage devices. Each device on a wide SCSI boost must be configured with a unique ID from 0 to 15. While a serial interface essentially transfers 1 bit at a time, a parallel interface such as SCSI transfers 8 bits or 1 byte or more and requires more wires in the cable and more pins in the connectors. One SCSI host bus adapter can control multiple devices attached by internal ribbon or external SCSI cables. But a key here, connected to the hard disk. All right, so we got 80%. All right, I want to show you what happens after you complete one of the lessons, just so you know. Good job with that. We did some good analysis. You do get like a review after you complete an assessment where you see how long it took you to do the question. It also shows you if it was moderate, easy. It also gives you a chance to review the question if you want to and see, you know, so this is a good place to kind of, you know, you could mark a question, review a question, you know, say you want to just look at the ones you got wrong and look at and review, why did I get that wrong? You can also add like a ribbon to a question. So if I look at the review, I could say, oh, I want to bookmark this question. And then maybe I want to add a note, like some vocab. You can do that within the portal. You can highlight. The highlight tool is a little glitchy. I'm not a big fan of it. I just feel like it doesn't like work as much as you like the way you'd want it to. But it's a great way to just take notes in here and kind of, you know, see what you need to look, kind of maybe memorize better. And it gives you the average correct, incorrect answer time. So it can tell you if you're rushing, basically. So here, the great part about the portal is it tells you how many questions, average answer time, the average time when we got one correct. And you'll notice that often you take longer on the ones you have incorrect because you're thinking about it and trying to kind of figure it out, where the ones you know, you kind of jump on. All right, so just think about that, okay? And the average for all questions is here too. So what do you think of the content of those lesson assessment questions for lesson 1? What do you think? Any thoughts, feelings, or chat comments?
I think it would be useful if they had some pictures at least, so we could see the hardware.
Yep. And I was thinking that too, as when we were talking about like the motherboard, and we were also talking about the heat sink. And I would have gone and done some search. Like I want to show you, but I also want to like, I feel like if I can show you the questions and talk about it, then we can kind of go back and look at the reading. It'll help out a lot. You're right. The pictures do help out a lot. It definitely help you recognize things that maybe you kind of have seen before too. So let's keep going because I want to be as productive and get into as much as you can. We're going to go into lesson 2, and this is installing system devices. You know, installing, you know, basically we're going to take it the next level here. All right. So I'm going to go to practice. I'm going to go to installing systems devices, and we can kind of start the same way because it's 8:02. I kind of want to spend some time in here going over questions. And remember, this is a new chapter, so it's going to be a new little level of learning. A technician is installing a new RAM in a company's workstation. The IT supervisor insists on ECC RAM to ensure high levels of reliability. Which of the following statements regarding ECC RAM is true? So this is a question, a select all that apply question. So it's a different format of question. So which ones are true? Most motherboards are designed to support both UDIMMs and RDIMMs, which you may not even know what that means yet. For ECC RAM to function, only the CPU needs to be designed to support ECC operation. Motherboards are designed to support UDIMMs, will typically not support RDIMMs, and vice versa. Mixing non-ECC UDIMMs and ECC UDIMMs in the same system is generally not recommended. So I will just give the test, the information here is basically, the acronyms. You're going to find more and more acronyms in each lesson. And this is a place where acronyms are kind of dominant in this question. So there's got to be more than one here. So which ones do we think it is? I would just give it a guess because based on the context. So new RAM in a company's workstation insists on ECC RAMs. Which of the following is true? Maybe B. And what else? And feel free to B and C. Let's do B and C. It was C and D. So it was motherboards that are designed to support UDIMMs will typically not support RDIMMs and vice versa. And mixing non-ECC UDIMMs and ECC UDIMMs in the same system is generally not recommended. So it's like a best practices and also hardware content question. So remember, it's C and D. Motherboards generally designed for one type of UDIMM or RDIMM and do not support both. Mixing non-ECC UDIMMs in the same system will lead to compatibility issues. Most motherboards are designed to either support UDIMMs or RDIMMs, but not both. Both the motherboard and CPU must be designed to do both. All right, next question. That's probably a pretty hard one. Our hardware technician installed a new power supply, PSU, so that's the power, in a workstation and removed any unnecessary power connector cables. What type of PSU did the technician install? So what type of power supply did the technician install? And it didn't need any other cables. So Siho says modular. So we're going to go with that. Good job, Siho. So it is modular. The hardware technician is installing a modular CPU, a modular PSU, which has a detachable power connector that allows the technician to reduce the number of cables to a minimum required. A redundant power supply unit, also called a failover power supply unit, is a second supply. ATX is the original PSU standard in which the connector P1 is a 20 pin and wires with black insulation are ground yellow and are V12V, red R plus 5V, and orange R plus 3.3V. ATX 12V is the version 2 PSU standard, which defines a 24-pin 2x2 12 P1 form factor, replace the 20-pin one. So you will review these, but ultimately this information around it being modular is the key answer. And you're going to learn ultimately what these other ones know, but you're going to understand the correct answer from the context of the question mostly. All right, good job, Zio. A hardware technician is building a server that will process financial data in real time and wants to use error correcting code, ECC RAM, that will detect and correct errors if possible. What other considerations will the technician need to include to support the ECC RAM? I welcome guesses. And it is a select all that applies, so very good pickup there. So we have some AC. Good job. Now, I will take a moment here and say good job on these. And I want you to recognize this. And this is like a general just comment to the class. Since we don't have our portal access yet, you're doing very well following along. So I appreciate your... And what I would tell you is that even if we had our portal access, we would be doing the same practice right now. And the reason why I focused on this type of practice is because this is what your exam is like. So what happens is people study and you're going to be spending a lot of time outside of class, like in the reading and doing assessments. But at the end of the day, the best way to feel confident in every single lesson with the information in every single lesson is to do like get a 90 or above on each lesson exam. So what I hope you're kind of recognizing is that as we do these questions, these are not simple questions, right? And understanding how to answer them comes from a mix of vocabulary and understanding the vocabulary, right? Which I don't expect anyone to like understand that. So just so you know that right now. And it's also understanding context, right? And it's also people have a different level of experience with the context. So just as we look at these questions and we evaluate them for how we're answering them, remember that it's a process. But we are ingraining in your mind right now what the correct answers are by reviewing them. And that's going to be incredibly helpful when you do this on your own, all right? Because you're going to be like, boy, what did we say in class? What did we talk about? What did I know was the right answer? So that's, I just don't want you to think like, this is what I would be doing with you anyways, except I would probably be sending you off for an hour to do it and then coming back and saying, let's do another one and review it and keep pushing you. So, I'm just doing it with you right now in completion because I think it helps to kind of review the questions together to a certain extent to understand the types of questions, but it also helps that you practice and you see which ones are right, because right now we're literally doing them and also knowing which ones are right or wrong. If you were doing them on your own, you might take them and then not know which ones were right until you were done. And then you would still have to review the right answers. So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone. We're taking the assessments and then we're also reviewing what the correct answers are. So just keep that in mind. Like you're actually getting a lot of information all at once here that's going to help you. So in terms of, the motherboard must have the memory controller, support of the ECC RAM. The technician will need to include a 72-bit data bus rather than regular 64 to support the functions of the ECC RAM in the server. Single channel memory means that there is one 64-bit bus between the CPU and the RAM, but this memory capability is not relevant to supporting ECC RAM in a server. A dual channel memory controller has two 64-bit pathways through the bus to the central processing unit. So when you do the reading, they're gonna give you more information around the background of this, but ultimately, your ability to understand how to use it in context will probably be a little bit more important too. All right, a hardware technician is upgrading a device with multiple identical central processing unit CPU packages. What class of computer is the technician most likely upgrading? Identical central processing unit packages. What class of computer? A hardware technician is upgrading a device with multiple identical CPU packages. What's our guess? I see a D. Let's go with a D. It is D. So the technician is upgrading a server class computer. Server motherboards are often multi-socket, meaning that the technician can install multiple identical CPU packages. All right. Regarding workstation class PCs, most vendors use the term workstation to mean a high performance PC, such as used for software development or graphics video editing. Many mobiles, such as smartphones, tablets, and laptops, use advanced RISC machine ARM-based CPUs and need to prioritize power and thermal efficiency plus weight over pure performance. The desktop segment covers a wide range of performance levels from budget to gaming PC. These performance levels show up in the CPU manufacturer's ranges. Very good job. Server. Multiple identical central packaging units. Server. Good job. A hardware technician is inspecting the notches on a dual inline memory module, DIMM. Remember what we talked a little bit about DIMM. What will the notches on the edge connector help the hardware technician to determine? If the DDR generation, if it's compatible with the slot, it's all that apply to, so it's going to be more than one. How to insert it properly if it has a heat sink. So a hardware technician is inspecting the notches on a memory module on the edge. So those memory thing, it's like a stick of memory. What will the edge connector help the technician determine? See how it says B and C. I would agree there. Yeah. And I think we're probably on target. Oh, A2, the DDR generation. So our guesses were that the notches help prevent the hardware technician from inserting into the wrong slot. Totally true. And the notches of the edge connector, you would also feel the slot the wrong way around. And also, it would have a DDR generation, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5. Linus Tech Tips has a great video on generations of DDR. Highly recommend it, but we'll also go over it in this class, but like he does a great job with that, going over the differences and upgrades from DDR over time and generations of DDR. DDR memory modules, or DIMMs, typically feature heat sinks due to the use of the high clock speeds, but that is not relevant to the notches. All right, so that's different. So very good. A hardware technician, we'll do this for 6 or 7 more minutes, and then we'll talk. A hardware technician is tearing apart a non-functioning computer to salvage parts and pulls out a memory stick that synchronizes its speed to the motherboard system clock and has a peak transfer rate of 1600 megabytes per second. What type of memory has the technician removed? He's tearing apart a non-functioning computer to salvage parts and pulls out a memory stick that synchronizes its speed to the motherboard. What are we feeling? CompTIA says C. Siho says B. Oh, I think CompTIA's response was old. Any other guesses? Not sure. It's okay. I'll do the SD-RAM because that was what's his name's guess. It was C. DDR SD-RAM. So just to cover this quickly, modern system RAM is double data rate synchronous dynamic random access memory. Double data rate synchronous dynamic random access memory. It makes 2 data transfer per clock cycle and has a peak transfer rate of 1600 megabytes per second. So there's your key note. Synchronous RAM, DRAM, is so called because its speed is synchronized to the motherboard system clock. Dynamic RAM stores each bit as an electrical charge within a single bit cell. A bit cell consists of a capacitor to hold a charge and a transistor to read the contents of the capacitor. Error correcting code, ECC RAM, runs in workstations and servers that require a high level of reliability. So it's a different type of RAM, all right? It needs to be more reliable. Their question was about DDR with C, DDR SD RAM, and it makes the point that the modern system RAM double date, they describe the DDR SD RAM, what it means, and the peak rate of 60 megabytes per second, which is included in the question. And then synchronous DRAM is called that because it's synchronized to the system clock. All right. So it talks about those components right there in the question. And they try to give you a context that sometimes matters and sometimes doesn't as much, right? So you always want to take that into account. A hardware technician is working on a new desktop with memory that can send 128 bits of data per transfer rather than 64. What is this referred to? Single channel, dual channel, triple channel, quadruple channel. What are we feeling? All right, but everyone's saying we see some D's. See any other guesses? B, Natalie. I'm going to go with the B too. It is B. Good job, Natalie, and good job anyone who said B. I think Wilt said B. So with this one, it is kind of like, you know, it's basically doubling it. The dual channel memory controller is there effectively, this is a dual channel memory controller. Is there effectively two 64-bit pathways through the bus to the CPU, meaning that each data transfer can send 128 bits of data because it's double. Single channel memory. So this is dual channel memory controller. Single channel memory means that there is one 64-bit data bus between the CPU, memory controller, and the RAM. In triple memory controllers, if the system does not have the full complement of modules, it will revert to the number of populated channels. Some CPUs and supporting chipsets have quadruple channel memory controllers. In this architecture, the system will only use the populated channels. Very good. And we're in the domain 2.2. We're given, so just to give you an idea of where we are with the scenarios and the exam objectives, which they include with every question, this is all about RAM, you know, different types of RAM, RAM speeds, RAM hardware, and how RAM works. Install the appropriate RAM is actually a scenario that is part of the exam. So they're teaching you how to pick the right one. So this one's considered easy. So let's see how we do. A part of tech security, a technician loans a laptop to employees when they conduct business. Oh, I like this question. Conduct business travel, and upon return of the device, the technician reformats the drive and reloads the operating system and all relevant software. After several years of following this process, the laptop becomes sluggish or freezes up. What component is likely causing this type of computer behavior? Motherboard, SSD, RAM, CDs. So I think it's automatically not CDs, and it's probably not SSD. It's either motherboard or RAM. Which do we feel like it is? We're feeling some RAM? We'll go with the RAM. Well, how's it SSD? I'm confused. Why would that create an issue? Let's learn. Use flash chips. Oh, degradation of flash chips. I would assume, in my mind, we haven't used SSDs where I worked. We installed SSDs instead of the old school hard drives. We flipped everything out. So I would have thought, oh, SSDs are just faster. But look at this. If they've been using SSDs, they're susceptible to types of degradation over the course of many write operations. So that's true. Like if you take an SSD and you're like wiping and re-adding and wiping and re-adding, you're going to wear down like the layout of the drive. The motherboard houses sockets for the devices that implement the core system functions of a personal computer: compute, storage, and networking. Random access memory storage technology is non-persistent. Non-persistent means that the RAM device can only hold data when the PC is on. Compact discs are a mainstream format. So you can see how I easily said, no, it's not compact discs. I actually thought it was SSDs, but that's the cause of the problem. And the motherboard is just like a piece of hardware that brings everything together. So that wouldn't be the issue. And it holds the issues. It just isn't the issue itself usually. So that's an easy question in that knowing that about SSDs. All right. So that's how you want to remember that question is SSDs are the ones that after they've been rewritten a lot are going to have some degradation. All right. A software developer is creating an application that will run multiple parallel threads through the central processing unit. At the same time, to reduce the amount of idle time the CPU spends waiting for new instructions to process. What type of process is the developer taking advantage of? So multiple parallel threads. So the developer is making an application running multiple parallel threads through the CPU to reduce the down idle time the CPU spends waiting for new instructions. So multi-socket, multi-threading, multi-core processor extensions. Give me some guesses. All right, people feeling it's C. Let's see, multi-core maybe. Oh, it's multi-threading. So the developer is taking advantage of multi-threading, which is when software runs multiple parallel threads to the CPU at the same time to reduce idle time. Server motherboards are often multi-socket, which means they use 2 or more physical CPUs, referring to as symmetric multiprocessing to deliver performance. Multi-core refers to a CPU design that puts 2 chips onto the same package. Most CPUs are multi-core, more than 2 cores. Multi-core and multi-threading features are designated by NC/NT notation. Processor extensions support virtualization, also referred to as hardware-assisted virtualization, and make the VMs run much more effectively. So multi-threading is when software runs parallel through the CPU at the same time to reduce idle time. An engineer is designing a new computer system and wants to provide active cooling to improve airflow and dissipate heat from around the components. What will the engineer use in the system? So they're looking to active cooling to improve airflow and dissipate heat from around the components. So what are they going to use? Heat sinks, fans, thermal paste, or thermal pads? Michael says B. Any other guesses? We'll go with the B. It is B. So the engineer will use fans, which actively improve airflow and help dissipate heat. Engineers use fans on the power supply and chassis exhaust point. So it's about the dissipation of the airflow inside the device. A heat sink is a block of copper or aluminum with fins. The fins expose a larger surface area to the air around the component to achieve a passive cooling effect by convection. Thermal paste glues a heat sink to the surface of a chip to ensure the best transfer of heat by eliminating small air gaps. So it's kind of like a glue, but it's thicker. A thermal pad performs a similar function to thermal paste. The pad is a compound that is solid at room temperature but softens when heated. A hardware technician is ordering a power supply PSUs for the organization's desktop computers. Most PSUs designed for use with desktop PCs are based on which form factor? So they're looking for power supply units for desktop computers. So what form factor? 226. So we'll see A. We'll try A. ATX. Yes. So the technician is looking for PSUs that have the ATX spec, as most PSUs designed for use with desktop PCs are based on the ATX form factor. So just remember, that's kind of like around the advanced, just a regular desktop PC is generally using the ATX. Small form factors, use the peripheral internet connect uses point-to-point for the mainstream, and mini ITX is appropriate for SSF computers. So that's kind of covered in the first lessons question too. It's kind of a similar topic, but just explained a different way. All right, a student is learning about computer hardware and the instructor selects them to identify the component that executes program instruction code. How should the student respond? So a student is learning about computer hardware and the instructor selects them to identify the component that executes the instruction code. So what is the component that executes the instruction code? People are feeling A, CPU. Let's go for it. It is CPU. So a student should respond with CPU, or central processing unit. The CPU in a computing device executes the program instruction code. Random access memory is a space where the computing device loads applications and files so the users can perform operations on that data. Cache is a small block of memory that works at the speed of the CPU or close to it, depending on the cache level. A hard disk drive, HDD, stores data on metal or glass platters coated with magnetic substance. The top and bottom of each platter has its own read-write head moved by an actuator mechanism. All right. What I'm going to do for the next minute or two is I'm just going to quickly just respond with the first one to get us through so you guys can see in the video what the questions are. So there's no need to answer. I just want to go through them very quickly so you can see what they are in the video. All right. And I'll just go over the correct, I'll just prick A just to not have to read through the whole thing and then read the correct one to you. All right. Everyone cool with that? Just so you can see a few more. I just want you to be able to see as many questions as possible. So good job on that one. So the next one is a system engineer configuring fault tolerance with a configuration using local stripped volume mirrored arrays. What redundant array of independent disk is the engineer using? That is D. So RAID 10 is the answer. And here is Y. All right. Then I'm going to hit continue. That way you can stop the video, but you'll have access at least to see. So which of the following central processing unit CPU architecture implements a system on chip? I'll just pick A. And it's D. So ARM processor. Advanced ARM designs implement an SoC, which means that all the controllers, including video, sound, networking, and storage, are part of the CPU. All right. Then to mitigate the high-end gaming system will generate an engineer is using a liquid-based cooling system in the design. Which of the following components are not part of an open loop liquid-based system? So they're looking for two, well, just one. It's B. So traditional heat sinks are not part of the liquid-based cooling system. All right. A hardware technician is reinstalling. So just if you wouldn't mind giving me just a minute, I'll go through these final questions. A technician is installing a heat sink with a central processing unit. Which of the following steps should they take? I'll put clean it, but it's A, B, and D. And it's clean it, apply thermal paste, and wear an ESD strap. All right. And that's that electrostatic strap. Then a hardware technician purchasing more servers for an organization needs to ensure the power supply units in the data center have the correct output to support them. What is the power supply units capability measured at? It is D. Energy Star is a model for determining efficiencies. It's wattage rating. Wattage rating is a measurement of power supply unit capability. Just two more questions, I believe. A hardware technician is scanning a computer's non-volatile storage devices for errors and infections. Which of the following will the technician include in the scanning? Select all that apply. So I'll select hardware technician. It is A, B, and D, hard disk drives, solid state drives, and mass storage devices. And we'll hit continue. Two more questions. An employee is leaving the company and must return any removable storage devices they have. Which devices will they most likely return? We'll say USB flash drive, SD card. And that's those two. USB flash, we'll go to the next one. 95 complaint, if purchasing mass storage device tells the salesperson must use flash memory. What type of salesperson will show that? What type of devices will the salesperson show the technician? SSD. It's B, SSD. And our final, so that was a 50, a little bit more complicated questions, but now you've seen them. I will cut this section out of the video for you so that you have access to those. Let me see everybody before we head off for the night. Let me just cut back to everybody. Well, thank you for that intense session. Thank you for sitting through that with me.